Deputy Clare Daly.
Thanks, Cian Corla. Well, I too welcome the bill. I was absolutely delighted when it was selected from the lotto. I think it's great to be discussing a positive and proactive proposition in relation to adoption, and I think the fact that the new minister has referenced the fact that it was part of his maiden speech many decades ago and we're still discussing adoption now is really indicative of the fact that we probably haven't, well, no probably about it, we haven't taken this issue seriously enough, and I do think that we unnecessarily complicate the issue and that the approach to adoption generally in this state has been one which in many instances would constitute a serious abuse of human rights, because precisely it didn't look at the issue from the standpoints of the rights of the child and the right and basic fundamental principle that everybody has a right to their identity. And I appreciate the fact that former Minister Fitzgerald discussed this matter with us on many different occasions, but it is also the case that the promised adoption tracing and information bill has been promised since the government has come to power. We're over 3 years in and it's been put back, and I'll maybe ask the Minister a question on that towards the end. But I think it is welcome that we're discussing this. I think, ironically, the film Philomena has had a huge impact in terms of the public and shone a light on this area and the practice that existed in Ireland in the past of separating thousands of young Irish women from their children, a separation which was forced, was illegal, and what the Adoption Rights Now group call torture. And I think one of the key points in that film that really struck everybody was that the realisation that both the mother and the son were searching for each other. They spoke to the same people, they were both lied to, they were both deceived in order to prevent that reunion. And to be honest, even talking about it is sickening. And I think what's more upsetting about it is the fact that that's just one story representing thousands of others. I told the story in here last year of how a woman had written to my office. She'd had a baby in the Castle Pollard mother and baby home in 1966. That child was taken from her without her permission. She spent 30 years seeking that child. She went to the Sacred Heart nuns. She asked for information. She was given misinformation, sent in many different directions. She at a certain point had an urgent requirement to meet her daughter for medical reasons and so on, but everywhere she turned for decades she got nowhere. Now, I'd made the point that we contacted the Adoption Rights Now group, and within 10 days we were able to contact the two parties, and the woman found that the daughter had also been looking for her. And I think, you know, when I told that story, loads of deputies from all sides of the House came up to me and said, that's unbelievable. We've met people over the years who've come into our clinics and said similar stories. We've tried to help them get the information and we haven't been able to do it. Now, we have to take note of that. That's just not good enough. If this Parliament can't change things and deputies from all sides of the House can't change it, well then, why are we here? This issue can be addressed, but there needs to be a far greater urgency than we've had in it to date. And in my opinion, you know, the reason why the information was withheld in those circumstances, that many of these adoptions were illegal and that the placements were organised in mother and baby homes. And I think, you know, it is the case that the legislation of 1952 and the Adoption Board in many ways facilitated the separation and the severing of the link, and let's be clear, between unmarried mothers and their children, and it was based solely on marital status. Now, the reality is that the need for Deputy First to bring forward this bill now is based on the fact that the 2010 legislation didn't address this situation, and it should have. In 1976, the British government passed legislation to allow access to birth records to all adopted people over 18 and limited access to those under 18. Why has it taken us so long to catch up? And to me, it has to be rooted in the illegal nature of the activities that went on in those mother and baby homes in the past. And we have only reluctantly come to terms with issues like the Magdalen laundries, and I'm not saying that's sorted yet or anything, but the victims of those schemes, people who were victims of abuse in residential institutions. To me, what went on in the mother and baby homes is part of that process. And we should remember that at one point, 97% of adoptions, 97% of children born to unmarried women were placed up for adoption. Obviously now it's only a handful, but we should remember that point when we talk about foreign adoptions, because it's the same in other countries. The reason why that changed was the introduction of allowances and payments for lone parents. It allowed women to keep their children, and similarly in other countries, many women who are maybe giving up their children for adoption would prefer to keep them. Now, Minister Fitzgerald told us last time round, in her last round as Minister for Children a couple of weeks ago, that the legislation in relation to the Adoption Information and Tracing Bill was imminent, that the heads of bill were going to go to committee, that she wasn't sure exactly when. Our hope was that that would be certainly this side of the summer. I hope that the new minister could maybe advise us on this, but she also sort of hinted at some vague legal complications that might delay this process. Now, I don't really accept that. I'm dying to see them, if you like. She said we'd understand more when we saw them, so I don't know why we can't be told what they are now. But a lot of this seems to be based on the arguments around privacy and the IOT versus B case. Now, that was a highly disputed judgment, and we should take cognizance of that. It related to a fostering case, not an adoption case, and the 1952 Act is open to question there. I mean, births are a public record, and to deny access to adopted people, to my mind, is totally blatant discrimination. Now, there are and have been and continue to be actually huge problems in the operation of the Adoption Authority as far as I'm concerned. The Adoption Rights Alliance claim that the HSE and private adoption agencies are in possession of up to 60,000 files, yet the Adoption Authority claims to have 11,000 people only registered to trace their loved ones, but yet only 660 have been reunited since 2005. That's just not good enough. The figures are nowhere near the numbers that are out there looking for that information. I think there needs to be an independent investigation into the files and improving access to the files, which again the former minister had referred to, but I think in practical terms we haven't seen much evidence of improvement. I think it's very welcome that this bill is going to be allowed to be brought to committee. I think it's really positive that we're discussing these issues in the chamber. President Higgins went on record recently saying that denying basic information in terms of people's identity was horrific, and I agree with him. The Australian government has gone further and officially apologise to all of the people in Australia who were illegally adopted. Again, in Britain, Gordon Brown did the same thing in relation to the British state's role in terms of illegal adoptions, and our government needs to similarly acknowledge the wrongs that were done to women and their children. It needs to face up to the illegality which it facilitated and operated for decades, as it will never undo the damage, but it would bring some assistance to reconciliation, and getting it right for the future and having an openness and transparency is an important part of that resolution.